Hey guys, welcome back. So in my last video I talked about the HendoPad and I said that he had some reservations about continuing the project, but turns out it's back on the table. He's making the pad and he sent me a new version. Now I gotta send him my old version back and he's gonna like reuse the parts or something, but he sent me this new one. I'm just gonna set it up for the first time. Now, I think when you buy his kit, he's got a good website and a video that probably explains like the setup process better than me. But the kits that he's sending, I don't think that they're going to have electronics. I think he just added the electronics for me to make my testing a little bit easier. But the electronics are essentially the same thing that NATO did from his pad. So, in summary, it's like a Pro Micro, which is like a teensy clone. Then I tweaked his Sujit software to handle choosing colors using the web UI. So all the pieces are there. You just have to buy the kit, and then you add in the electronics. It's just built the same way as NATO's pad or really any other FSR pad, and then you load in the software, and then you're good to go. Now, I gotta say that when Hendo packages a pad, he does so amazingly. I mean, everything is bubble wrapped, and I just love how it all just comes in the box like this. Putting it together is pretty easy. It probably took me like 25 minutes. You just gotta loosen up these little T-nuts, and then you slot them in. Just be careful not to tighten them too much until you make sure that the spacing is correct. I did have an issue where one of these was off a little bit, and then the panel didn't fit, so I just had to flip it upside down, loosen it, fix the spacing. But once it's flipped over, then you just put the panels in the little 3D printed hinges. Then Bob's your uncle. You move on to the next one. In case you didn't watch my last video, the HendoPad is a very lightweight travel pad, and it's like an incredibly simple design, all mostly just built around the center panel itself, which is not a real arcade center panel. It's something that Hendo is manufacturing, made out of steel. It's very, very lightweight, and it's it's not like the sturdiest feeling pad. I mean, if you're like a real stomper and you're used to like the real heavy feeling of like an arcade pad, probably not the pad for you. But if you can get away with playing minimally, and or you want a pad that is like easy to throw in a suitcase and actually travel with, this is like the best pad for that I've ever used. I have two other travel pads, and they're just too chunky. This is the actual like lightweight, easy to move around one. So you can see it goes together pretty well. I had all the electronics, all the sensors already set up by Hendo, so thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. It is such a cool design. I really, really love how this pad is built. It's so much more like well thought out compared to the ones I built myself. The lights are awesome. They work really well with the software. Um, you just flip through like some basic. These are the same color profiles that I did for my other pads. I just got them to work with this light setup with the four panels and no underglow. And yeah, it's in Sujit software. This is the same stuff that pretty much everyone's using for their FSR pads. There's just like another tab that has like where you select the color profiles. So if you end up getting a Hendo pad, and you can just grab my branch from my fork of Sujit's code base. And if you use the same electronics, like a Pro Micro, and everything else is pretty much matching NATO's electronics, then the only thing you'll have to tweak software-wise is just setting the COM port, like the serial port, for whatever it's plugged in on your machine, and it'll be different. And maybe the ordering of the sensors in the UI, you might have to tweak that a little bit depending on which sensor pins you used on the Pro Micro. One thing you'll notice is that compared to the prototype version that I had before, this version he made the center panel larger, so now it matches the ITG center panel pretty much exactly. So previously it was like 10.5 inches, and now it's closer to like 11 inches. So you can see on this pad, Hendo put some little foam pieces of tape here. So that means that all of the force is going to be on these two spots of the FSR, but this whole thing is active. So that will push down on these two areas, and it will also probably wear on the FSR, obviously unevenly. It's going to wear on this area and this area, and then not wear on this at all. I'm not actually sure if that's good for the sensor, or maybe that's nice because you can wear this down and after a couple of years you could like move it and use this area. But I've on my other pads, I've always had the tape go all the way across so it presses on the whole thing. But it's just worth noting that this is another strategy, another way to do it. Seems to work okay for me. And then I'm just going around and I'm like pressing on the pad and I'm trying to see any spots that it's uneven. There's a weird sound coming from over here that isn't really present over here. So that means that something's probably loose, in these hinges. I need to tighten something up, or the panel's not even. There's just something that's moving here. And I want to clean those up. You want to like go and figure out what all those problems are, because any weird vibrations or movements are just going to be more error that show up on your sensor values. So you kind of want it to be as repeatable as possible. And these are adjustable right here. There's 3 adjustments for the back side of the sensor, but you're definitely at some point, some of these panels you're going to want to either raise or lower by adding or removing tape here. It's pretty common that your up arrow is, at least for stamina, your up arrow is a lot higher than all the other panels. This, these pad modding of getting it the way you like it and experimenting and figuring out what you like, that is all part of the process. If you're buying a pad like this, I would not expect to like buy it and then just immediately play and like love it your first time. Any pad that you get, especially for stamina stuff, you have to do a little bit of tweaking to get it to work for you. And even once you do that tweaking, you do have to adjust to whatever you have. That is definitely a process. I don't care what kind of pad it is. If I'm trying to pass like the hardest stamina stuff I can pass, there is just a time that I have to keep playing to adjust to things. It's just part of the process. So just a quick note, this is an example of like a sticking sensor. You can see that the value, which is that white block, is pretty high, and it's staying that way. And if I go here and just kind of like lift this panel and drop it again, you can see it's much lower now. But it was much higher before. It was like here before, and then now after just moving it a little bit. So that's not really like ideal. You don't want that to happen, but it is like a physical thing. It's not like a software thing, or so these hinges are just a little too stiff. So if you see something like that happen, you just got to mess with it a little bit. Now another good technique to try is just to like stomp on your pad, and you can see that my up arrow is triggering, the light is changing, and if we see the FSR values, you can see here, that is bad because that means if I just move a little too much, I'm going to be triggering the up arrow when I don't want to. So that means that I either need to stop some of the vibration here, my little setup here with this piece of plywood, I need to like soften that or something. Or the other way to deal with it is to make my up arrow, again, less sensitive. It's oversensitive right now. You can see that all it has to do is just go from here to here and to trigger. So it probably should be a little bit higher. So that's another thing you got to watch out for. Now then you want to play a song that you're very comfortable with playing, something that's easy for you, and just see what feels off. So I just played a little bit and I was just getting a lot of like decents and way offs, and especially on my left and right. So I think 2 ways to approach that problem is we could lower the left and right panels, physically the height of each panel, so I hit them less often. I think what's happening is as my foot is moving forward or back, when I'm not trying to hit the left or right, I'm swiping it and triggering it. So another thing that could be is an oversensitive left and right arrow. So I think I'm just going to try to take my left and right and just raise them up a little bit and see if that improves things. So now I'm going to do a little play test. Just to clarify, I have been playing for like maybe 45 minutes or an hour so far on this new pad, just trying, slower stuff that I could, just dial in the pad. I'd fail and then go back and tweak the settings, and then I got it to a place that was like kind of good enough. Now you're going to see it's a little weird here because the you see the light from the pad below triggering, and that's because I should have unplugged it. Another weird thing is that I have these um, rug gripper pads underneath the pad, which looks a little bit weird, but I ended up putting a like a yoga mat and then a plywood base and then the rug gripper things on top of that, just because the pad below it was not a level surface. So with this pad, with the Hendo pad, you really want to have this on a very flat, ideally hard surface. But you also don't want it to slide around. So I think having something like thin and grippy underneath is probably a good thing to put down if you're going to put it on concrete or a hardwood floor or something. I would, if you have a rug that is like a low pile, it's probably okay. But if your rug is very squishy, a high pile, then you might want to put something hard underneath it. So the pad is very fragile if you were to try to bend it, like bend it away from you. So you kind of want it to be on a nice stable surface. I do want to mention for anyone who's looking to buy one of these that there are other travel pads available, and I think this is such an awesome thing that people have started to make these projects. The one that I haven't talked about much before is DDR EXP in the Netherlands. They have this thing they call it the FSR mini pad. It's a very generic name. But they only make it in batches, so it's using the Kyle Ward style of marketing where it's like, oh, there's a new batch of 10 available, and everyone just like buys them really quick because they're like afraid of missing out, and then they're gone, instantly. That pad is pretty expensive. Don't quote me on this, but I think I recall it being like $700 or $800 shipped to the USA. I might be wrong, could be less. But they got a website up, and he's always making more batches of them. So if you're in Europe, that's probably a good option to be aware of. All right, that's a cool looking pad. It's very professional, sturdy looking. I've never played on one, but I know like some people who have, and there's pros and cons, but it's cool. I like it. There's a new player on the block, newer than Hendo, which is this guy Vincenzo. Now Vincenzo is an Italian guy, and he has he's got some hardware chops. I mean, he built like some I/O thing, like he made an open source version of the DDR I/O, and now he's trying to get into pads, and he's building a travel pad. It appears to be more sturdy than the Hendo pad, but it's also going to be a little bit more money, but with electronics. And you've got to ship it from Italy. So if you're in the USA, this might end up being, a lot more expensive. I think the price he's looking at right now is $530 with electronics. That's probably before shipping too, and it's not exact because it's, the pad doesn't exist yet. It might be worth waiting for that or to learn more about that if you're in the market. But that said, the HendoPad doesn't exist, but it's very close. I think I need to get the details from him, but he's ready to sell this thing like soon. He's got the website up, and they're going to ship from the USA, which is a huge benefit for people like me, because if you're in the USA and you want to buy like an LTEC, LTEC might only cost $150, but it's like another $150 to ship it, so it ends up being $300. So for people looking at like an LTEC, you might want to now consider like a HendoPad if it's going to be, in that like $300 range before electronics. The electronics are probably like in the realm of $60-$70, but count on 100 because you're going to have to buy some tools you might not have. So it's a good option because honestly, because it ships from the USA. I think the upper bound of like what you could expect to pass on a HendoPad is probably a little bit better than a stock LTEC. I don't know. I actually haven't played on an LTEC, so I probably shouldn't say that. But I just wanted to make sure everybody understands the landscape. The HendoPad is here. It's almost here. And I really hope for the success of this project. Now, he did send this to me for free. That's not why I'm speaking positively about it. I think that it's a great project. It's well designed. I like that he seems like he's going to make them available and not just in like little runs of batches. that are going to sell out right away. And I think this is like the pad for like the everyman, you know what I mean? And definitely somebody traveling. This is like the most lightweight pad. It just disassembles so small. It's like it's a beautiful thing. And I think all these pad projects are great, but I've played on the Hendo one and I can say that like it's pretty solid, it for sure. And I'm excited to get these in people's hands. It's essentially like, it's like a lighter weight version of a NATO pad that you can just buy. And it's like just the ability to just buy a pad is like that is like so great. It's like for so long we couldn't buy a pad. You had to just move the whole earth and like make your own pad. And it's like, not everyone is a electrical or a hardware engineer. It's just like it's just nice that you can just go out and buy something. And I like that there's like a nice kit for that now. So now I'll level with you guys a little bit. I actually made this video a little bit long and a little bit boring on purpose because I am actually giving away this pad that Hendo sent me. This is something that Hendo and I talked about. I've got a lot of travel pads. I really don't need them. I had fun kind of like reviewing this and setting it up and giving him feedback. But if I just keep this thing, even though after spending all the time tuning it and modding it, I do kind of want to keep it. It's just going to stand around in a pile with my other travel pads. So I'd like to give it away. So I do have to pay for the shipping for this. So I know this kind of sucks for international people, but I'm only going to give this away to somebody in the United States. I'll put a link in the description, and that link will have like a survey. You can put in your address. Please include your full mailing address, including your name and all the information needed for the post office. I'm talking to you Zoomers. And just fill that out, and I will, like semi-randomly, somehow, I will select somebody from that list after like, 2 or 3 days. I'll make sure to close the survey after I've selected somebody, so a year from now people aren't trying to fill that out. And yeah, so I'll box it up, I'll send it to you, and then you'll have a pad. So thanks for watching, everybody. I appreciate you taking some time and learning about the HendoPad and going on this little journey with me. And I want to thank Hendo for providing the pad that I can give away to one of you guys. See ya.